Good morning. Well, let's go back again now to this early apostolic church. The apostles, they were either driven out of Jerusalem or decided to leave Jerusalem and go out and proclaim the gospel, the good news, to anybody who wanted to hear it. And yes, they did travel from city to city and establish different churches in different areas, groups of Christians getting together and following the example of those early apostles. They would meet together for prayer. They would meet together to study the scriptures. They would meet together to have fellowship with one another. They would meet together to break bread together in the great Eucharistic service as they showed forth the death of Christ until he came. And as they grew and as they developed, yes, they were given different gifts in the groups where they could be led forward and shown more and more about what the Christian faith was all about. So we get these different groups developing throughout the world, in the different cities, and spreading out from there. Thomas, for instance, he went all the way down into India, and you'll find in India even today churches which will declare that they were founded by this great apostle Thomas. We don't know much about him, or where he went, or what he did, but he had this great journey. Peter, he traveled throughout the world and established churches, usually starting with the Jewish community in which he went. Paul, he established many churches amongst the Gentiles peoples. And all of these were gathering together for the breaking of the bread and for the teaching and for the prayers and for supporting each other and blessing each other. But then, of course, the early apostles started to die out. And in these different churches, elders were developing, people with a skill of leadership that God had given to the church. And gradually the church spread until it was established almost throughout the known world. Small groups of Christians meeting and declaring the gospel. We then come to a strange time, because although we have the Acts of the Apostles recorded for us, we don't have much after that telling us what happened in the early church. What we do know that somehow the church went into a dark time where there's no real records of what is happening. And it went into this dark time with these small groups of Christians being led by the apostles and the prophets and the pastors and the teachers and the evangelists. And when it came out on the other side, it came out with a different structure, different organization. It came out with bishops, priests, and deacons. Yes, bishops, priests, and deacons, the very form we find in the church even at the present day. For some reason, we don't really understand how or why, the church had decided to organize itself. You see, there are many documents that we do have, and these documents say that these early Christians were finding difficulty in how to recognize one another. They're finding difficulty in how to organize each other. But when it came out at the end of the 2nd century, it had this new form of bishops, priests, and deacons. And the bishops, they were in charge of the major cities, the groups meeting in different cities. And then they would go to others where the elder perhaps had died, and they would appoint another elder in that city and pray for that man to become and be given the authority to govern that church again. And so they found ways of examining one another to make sure that they were still on the right track and they were still proclaiming the same gospel. And so the church has now been organized in different ways. It passed through the centuries. Now, have you ever heard of a thing called Chinese whispers? A game that children used to play? You whisper something from generation to generation. You pass a message from person to person, and you go round in a circle. And then when it comes to the end of the circle, you ask what the message was, and somehow the message had become distorted. Well, that's what happened in the church as well. The message of the gospel would gradually become distorted. And over again, God has had to reform the church, bring in great reformations, which bring us then back again to the writings of these early apostles, to the early documents that the church had received, to the book that we call the Bible and the New Testament, explaining once again in the simplest terms what the Christian faith is all about. Because as the message passed on, suddenly you will find distortions creeping in, but it has to be taken back over and over again. And this is why the Bible is so important, because it gives us a book of documents written by 66 different people over a period of thousands of years, and given to us from the Old Testament and through the New Testament, the story of what God has done for his people, and to the New Testament, the story of what Jesus has done for us. So we have the Bible, and it is such an important document. See, first of all, it is written in the language of his own day, which was Greek and Hebrew, but gradually it's been translated into every language of the world. And if ever you go round, you can find copies to suit your own liking. But I say to you very simply, because we have to be careful all the time about the Christian faith that we hold, then we must still go back to it over and over and over again to find out the truths that it enshrines. Amen.